Son, I would tell you this much, son. I would never have put more 3,000 with 2 tens.
Oh, here we go.
That's why they sent me. I am an expert.
What's up, guys? My name is Carl, back with another YouTube video. And in this one, I'll go over how to use Simple Postflop, as it has been brought to my attention by one of you in the comments of one of my recent videos, that there isn't a lot of information out there on Simple Postflop in English. So I'm just gonna show you how I use this piece of software. I've been using it for many years. I bought this one over PioSolver when they were both coming up for historical reasons. They both have their advantages and disadvantages now, but I think when I bought it, Simple Postflop had a small edge. So I'm just gonna show you how I use it. I might miss some functionality or don't know the details, but I hope that I can at least show you enough to get started. And as usual, there's gonna be a link in the description for a nice 10% discount on Simple Postflop. So yeah, Simple Postflop and PioSolver both are the biggest GTO solvers. This is not going to be intro to GTO solvers in general. It's just going to focus on Simple Postflop. So let's see where we can get started. So maybe quick thing about the settings here. So when you download the software, you go to standalone and click on license. This is where you input your license information. I'm just gonna flash the settings here that I'm using. I wouldn't be able to perfectly explain you why I have these settings. I think I have chosen those because I thought they were correct in the past, at least for my computer, but I wouldn't be able to explain perfectly why this is what it is. So calculation, you have a couple of algorithms or ways to calculate. So A3 was, I think, the best one for me. So I am using Simple Postflop as a standalone program. It does its calculations on my computer. You also have remote calculations where you pay the guys of Simple Postflop to solve your solves in the cloud. Don't really know how that works. Accuracy, I solved river with highest accuracy, but I'm fine with flop and turn being middle. Very often I will recalculate turn and or river anyway, so seems fine like this. Just have a look at this. I think my computer has 12 cores, so this is what I'm showing here. So yeah, just showing you guys that. Don't have a perfect explanation for those settings, so maybe not the best start of this video. But yeah, let's just move on. Preflop language scale, so that's not all relevant. Let's go to the basics. How do we make a simple game tree? So the first thing you do when you have something loaded or it's not loaded, so usually you don't have to click on this, but once you have already made a tree, you can click clear situation to go back to the start. So here you get to first input a board. So let's choose this board. So that's step one, inputting the board. Then you input the stack sizes. So the spot we're looking at or gonna be wanting to input is, let's say, a button open versus a big blind flat. So effective stacks, they would actually be a bit different. If you go to 2.25, it would be kind of like this. Doesn't really matter that much. I think effective stacks in Simple Postflop go up to 200 or 250. So yeah, see these stacks as big blinds. So the pot will be 5 big blinds when a small blind folds and the big blind flats. Then we go to the bet sizing. So in Simple Postflop, you have player 1 and player 2. Player 1 will always be the out of position player, and player 2 the in position player. I think there's some setting where you can change how these are named. Oh yeah, here is who is out of position, player 1. So it's just always like that in my game tree. It doesn't have to be that way. So when you click on this bet sizing, you can input the different sizes that can be used on various streets. So now we are looking at player 1's game tree, so out of position player. I'm not letting him donk on the flop, so we just give him no bets size on the flop, it does get to have a raise size. You can input more sizes, of course, but the more sizes you have, the more complicated your game tree will be. So you see that I have a variety of sizes on turn and or river. Here's some other things to fine tune, and once you have created like a set of bet sizes that you think is good, you can save these bet sizes for future use. So you click on the save button here and you get to save them as a file that Simple Postflop knows how to deal with. So this is the first part where you can save some of your game tree settings, but I don't really use this one as much anymore, and I'll show you guys in a second why. You can cap the amount of bets that goes in. Maybe you don't want infinite click it backs, then you can cap the maximum amount of bets. Last action always all in. This all seems pretty standard. It's pretty comparable to Simple Postflop. Sorry, of course it's comparable to Simple Postflop. Pretty comparable to PioSolver, except that you can save just your bets instead of having to save the full game tree. So once you have done that, you can create betting pattern for player 1, betting pattern for player 2, and then you will click on apply situation. It's a bit of a thing where it seems to be lost in translation. Let's put it like that. For me, the software makes sense now. In the beginning, I struggled with it occasionally because sometimes the way it's named, it's a bit confusing. So when you apply a situation, it means you take the board, the stack sizes and the bet sizes, and a game tree is created. For these bet sizes, for this board. And if you want to change this board, you need to clear the situation. So that's a part that was a bit confusing to me at first. Like, I don't really understand why you can't have the game tree and then change the board without changing the game tree, but this is just the way it seems to work in Simple Postflop. When you have a certain game tree and you want to use that game tree on a different board, you need to clear the situation. So we apply the situation. We see that we still have 100% ranges here, so I'm gonna have to input the range for player 1. So again, you see that I have a bunch of ranges saved here. So I would somewhere have something like big blind versus... Don't I have this one saved? That's awkward. Okay, yeah, something like this. So I will click it. You can also manually select it in the grid. You can save this range. So you can save your bet sizing pattern. You can save your range. So here I have a bunch of ranges saved. I will apply this. Here I'm gonna go for a button open. So it would be something like this. I apply this. And this whole thing, so the combination of stacks, the game tree, and the ranges, this is what you can save as your game tree. So I would save this. It's in the folder tries. This was the default, so I didn't bother changing that. But you can save the game tree. And then afterwards, let's say you want to go to a different board, you clear the situation, you take a new board, and then instead of having to input all of this and having to input the ranges again, I have a bunch of trees that I have saved here, and I would just click on button versus big blind, boom. This is applied to this specific board. So now I cannot change the board. To change the board and have another button versus big blind spot, I would need to clear the situation, then change the board, and then apply this situation or this game tree again. So this is, I'm so used to it now, but in the beginning this seemed like it's not optimal design, but it's whatever, it's all good now. So this is how I most effectively use Simple Postflop. So once you, in the beginning, it's a bit of a pain in the ass to set up all these game trees, but once you have input all the common spots, you can just clear and then apply and pick your common spot for the specific board you want to look at. So that will save you a ton of time once you have gone through the initial hassle. So often my workflow, if you want to name it like that, would be something like I mark my hand when I'm playing, and the next day I start the day with going through my marked hands. So I will have like, let's say 10 hands I want to have a quick look at. So it's not going to be dedicated in-depth study, but I will just have 10 hands, 10 unrelated hands that I want to have a look at. So let's say it's this spot, button versus big blind. So I click here. Yeah, the game tree is created. Then I can click at add job. So Simple Postflop works with a list of jobs. So you can first create a bunch of jobs like I have done now. So I add a job, I name it. Then I would clear it, and let's say I have this spot, and it's going to be 3-bet small blind versus button with my specific game tree. So I make like 10 new game trees. If I press Shift plus J, I open the job lists. So you see that you have an input folder and an output folder. So we have 2 unsolved situations or game trees in the input folder. So if I click Run Calculate Now, Simple Postflop will start the job queue and solve all of these. So I just start my day with inputting like 10 new sims that I want to run, and then I run calculate while I have my coffee or have breakfast or read something or whatever. Here there's some other settings like calculate settings. I'm just flashing this. I don't really care too much about the details here. Accuracy, I usually start with low because when they're solved, I think low is fine enough for the flop. And then the nice thing about Simple Postflop is that you can easily recalculate turn and or river. But yeah, so this is the job queue. Just run calculate. You can also stop the queue. So yeah, let's say you have 20 trees lined up and you notice that it's going to take a while and you want to do something else after 5 solves, you can stop in that queue. So this is my standard workflow in Simple Postflop, and yeah, I like it like that. So once you have put in the initial work, you just have a bunch of game trees that you use, you can choose from. Now the nice thing about Simple Postflop is that yes, you have the bet sizes, you have the input here to create the game tree, but you can easily manually edit the game tree. So most of these situations or trees are already like fine-tuned by me. So let's say we have a big C bet, in position raises, and then I think this 45 is too big or too small. I could manually edit this to a smaller size. So I did that by right-clicking on a specific node, and then you can click Edit Node to alter the bet size. And then if I'm happy with the new result, I can save the tree. So the game tree doesn't need to follow this pattern of bet sizing. You can specifically in one part of the game tree edit one specific node to something that seems better or seems to be more like sizing people are using in game. So for example, we see bet, we get a call, we get this turn. Let's say I want to add a certain bet size. I can right click here and add a node. So let's say I would like to have a bet of 25. So we've added this. There's automatically gonna be some raises based on the sizes you gave player 2 here. And let's say I like this game tree. I will save that one, override some of my previous solves. So let's open a solution. For example, button versus big blind here. I have two sizings on the flop. Let's say we have a bet and a call. We go to the turn. Maybe I would like to have a look and see if a bigger overbet size would be picked. Then I can click here. No, sorry, I click here. So after the check, I will add a note of 2 times spot. And then I can click on calculate turn, and it doesn't need to resolve from the flop. It just calculates this turn. Now, in theory, this isn't perfect because the turn and river options the solver has will have an input on the decisions that are made on the flop. But adding a tiny overbet won't really change flop play that much. But you could keep those things in mind, that in some specific spots it might show up on the previous street. So if you add extra options on turn or river and you calculate turn or river, remember that in theory this would alter the optimal play on the street before that. So it could have an impact on some spots, but usually I kind of keep my trees a bit simpler on turn and or river. And then once I enter a specific spot, I might want to add a bet size or remove a bet size. So let's say we had a small c-bet on the flop, turn goes check, check, and then on the river, let's remove this one. Imagine I didn't have that small bet size. Then I could say, maybe on this flush run out, we benefit from having a small bet size. So I just added that, click on it, and we see that it's used. And then I have an in-depth look at it, and I'm like, well, maybe this small bet size is used because player 2 doesn't have good raise sizes. So I want to add a bigger raise size that it's not all in yet. See if that impacts anything. So, oh yes, now 30 is used instead of the jam raise. So for me, this is one of the big benefits of Simple Postflop, that I'm able to, one, manually edit a specific part of the game tree and then save that game tree that I think is better than one that is just built by this. And also that as I'm studying specific spots, I can still edit the game tree a bit and just calculate turn or river. So I don't need to save my game tree with 5 river sizes because that makes the game tree so much bigger, and when you solve it from the flop, it will take up way more time and memory to solve that huge game tree. So yeah, big benefit from Simple Postflop. For Simple Postflop here over Pile Solver is this, in my opinion. So that's still part of my basic workflow. So let's go over some other settings that I haven't looked at yet. So benefits of Simple Postflop is I like this here, the thing I'm hovering over with my mouse. So it gives us a reasonably quick overview of how various parts of the range are played. So it's not perfect because we see here top pair is very often bet, but how often is it exactly? Well, I don't know, like 90% of top pairs are bet. But it could give you a nice overview of how you play a certain set of hands. And you can also uncheck some of these. So maybe you empty all of them and you just want to look at how various second pairs are played. So you can see how the c-bets are distributed here. Let's check all of them. Empty, maybe we care about the gut shots. So we see ace queen is always bet, while ace 10 is check back sometimes. Check. Maybe this is more interesting on the turn. So we see that sets, 2 pairs, and over pairs are always barreled, but over pairs start to get mixed. Sorry, over pairs. Top pairs start to get mixed. So maybe you want to have a look at the top pairs, how they are played. So that's how we did that. Check all of them again. Here with the draws, we see that combo draws are always barreled, but maybe we want to have a look at some open-enders, how they are played. So we see some checkbacks here. We can click here on the Queen 10 and have a look at how specific combos are played. So we see that the Queen 10 with the hearts is checked 58% of the time, almost never bet for the small size, and is overbet most often for the 1.5x sizing. So here we see the actions, the frequencies, and here what I have as a standard is the equity versus the call, but you can I think you can change it here, yeah. So Queen 10 has 33% equity versus villain's range, but I'm interested in the equity versus the call. So we see when you check back, you keep that the same equity, the equity versus the range. But when you bet and you get a call, you are up against a stronger range. So you have some part of your bet is benefits from full equity, and some part of your bet is up against the new stronger range. So when you bet and get called, you have 20% equity. I think that's something interesting to look at. It also helps us to look at some of the thinner value bets, perhaps, see how much equity they would still have when called. And also interesting maybe is that King 4, it could bet for an overbet and get called and still be ahead, but still the solver decides to check it back. So things like that are interesting in my opinion. I like this feature, and I don't think BioSolver has that one. So keeping an eye on the equity when called. So yeah, I was talking about this. So this is it's part of Simple Postflop that I didn't really use that much in the beginning, but now I use it often. So really helps us to look at how for example, the turn betting range is constructed. So there's no slow plays with sets or two pairs or over pairs. No, those are barreled very often. But we see that some flush draws and some open-enders get mixed into that checkback range, and some gut shots too. So while we don't see the perfect exact frequency, we do get a quick overview of how various parts of the range are played. So I like that. So that's this part of Simple Postflop. Let's move on here. I always display the Nash EVs. So those are the equilibrium EVs in Simple Postflop. You could have equities or whatever, but I always display the EVs. So these are always shown in function of the initial pot. So even though we are on the turn with a pot of 8.3, the Nash EVs still add up to 5, which is our initial pot. So that's something, that you just need to be aware of, that it's always going to be always going to be adding up to our initial pot. And you can click on various parts in the game tree and see how the Nash EVs are there. So when you click here, you see the Nash EVs at the start of the game tree. So big advantage for player 2. After player 2 checks back, we see that his EV drops a bit because he will be checking back a weaker range. Then we have a deuce of diamonds on the turn. We can click here. We see that that's kind of a neutral card, or the EVs for player 2 don't change that much. But when he faces an overbet, his EV drops drastically because facing an overbet, that's up against a strong polarized range. When he faces an overbet and he calls, well, he has strengthened his range again, so his EV goes up again. So this is a nice way to see how various turn and rivers influence EVs. Here you have some settings to change the weights of how this is displayed. I like it like this. It's not, I didn't put too much thought in that, but it's just how I'm used to it, and that's what seems to be working for me. So okay, moving on to other settings, other things I like. Let's say, for example, we continue this. So we had a check back facing an overbet and a call, and then we see that we need to calculate river. So I think as a default I have, or it is the simple postflop default, or it is my default, that the next street is loaded automatically. But so when I solve the flop, the turn will be solved and remembered already in my saves, but the river isn't. So I need to calculate the river. Here, for example, I could add a smaller bet. Maybe we care about that. Maybe it's taken. So yes, it is taken. And maybe this small bet will have an impact on how I want to play the turn. Calculating the turn takes a bit longer than calculating the river. So I'll also have an eye on the accuracy here. So it's gonna be more accurate when I specifically solve turn only. So the Nash distance is how the accuracy is displayed in Simple Postflop. Yeah, so this takes a bit longer when you have all these different bet sizes. It says download result, but that's also bullshit. Okay, so when we solve this more accurately and we have a ton of river options, we see that we only overbet or just check back. And it's crazy amount of overbets with just the deuce. I'm learning here while making this video. Amazing. So yeah, that's the 3 river. Maybe you're interested in everything that could happen on all rivers. So a feature where PioSolver has the edge, in my opinion, is the way of making that visible. So in PioSolver, you have the hotness report or something like that, where you have a clean overview of how various actions are taken on various turn and rivers. So in Simple Postflop, you would click here on the river, calculate all runouts. So they need to be calculated again. And yeah, I have a couple of bet sizes, so it goes fast, but not instantaneously. So now we calculated them all. I think now I just click on this button. It's aggregating this info. And it also matters which part of the game tree you selected. So here we just see EVs at the start of various rivers. But I could also click here on one of the bets, and then you can see where various bets are taken. So for example, we can sort by highest frequency of the smaller bets. So we see that most often it's on the 9, ace, or the 8 that we like those bets. Maybe we're interested in the rivers we jam the most. So that's going to be a deuce and the 9s. So that's how you use these aggregated reports here. I think you can also export them, but I haven't really done that. So similarly, like you do the runout calculation here on the river, you can do the same on the turn, but I'm not going to do that now since it's going to take a while. And yes, you can also do aggregated calculations on the flop. So maybe I'll show you guys how something like that is done. So I use Simple Postflop mostly for those quick sims of hands that I marked and want to have a quick look at. So you just add them to the jobs report, but you can also do a more in-depth focused study of a very specific spot. So what you would do there is you're gonna click on the generate boards button. And here on the paste drop down, I often use it to solve 25, 74, or 184 flops. So just like in PioSolver, PioSolver has made available a set of flops with certain weights that should be a good, I can't think of the right words, that should come close to the reality of all flops, a good approximation of all flops. So same here, Simple Postflop has these sets of weighted flops that are a good approximation of the full game. So let's say we want to solve 25 flops. We do it like this, and it will already use, so I clicked on generate boards, it will already use this game tree. So now I will save 25 flops of button versus big blinds in the single raise spot. I'm not gonna do that now because it's gonna just be spam in my folders, but this is how you do it. You click OK, and then 25 flops are created and they will be put into your input folder. Now, if you want to make it a bit more clean, you can make in your input folder, make a specific folder for those button versus big blind spots, and then just change the folder you use as an input folder, change the folder you use as an output folder. So for example, there's nothing here. For example, okay, it just doesn't show them. Never mind. So for example, I did some studies where I solve for a specific board. No, sorry, solve many boards for a specific spot. So here we have 3-bet front big blind versus cutoff. So I think I have 25 flops in that folder. I will open one now. And you can merge and analyze the results of those 25 flops. So yeah, the first thing you do is you create those 25 flops, put them in your input folder, you run your jobs, you have 25 flops of the same spot in a certain output folder, and then you can aggregate information. So to do that, you open one of those flops, which I have done here. Then you can click on merge same trees. To do that, you go to the folder that has all those flops that you want to merge. Oh, it's even 74 flops. So 74 situations were merged. So we have done that now. We get an extra option here, and that is EV aggregation. So this will take a bit since it's 74 flops. And I might have to cut this out since it's not the most interesting part, but maybe I'll just keep talking while this is going. So what we will see are the EVs, the preflop EVs of various hands. So you could actually use this tool or this way of working to fine-tune your 3-bet calling range. So let's say this spot represents you opening to 2.25 and you face a 3-bet to 8. So a profitable call would need to have an EV of 5.75, or otherwise you'd be better off just folding. So once this is done, I can show you the EV of various hands in the calling range. So this is how before you had advanced preflop solving tools that you could run on a server, you could do things like this by hand. So we're gonna apply the weights of those 74 flops. So here we see the weights were still 1, but I clicked on this, I applied the weights, it's loading, it's confusing applying those weights. Okay, so we have done that. So now we are interested in player 1 EVs, and we're gonna see if we are making some bad calls according to Simple Postflop. So we need an EV of 5.75, as I said. I see that I have like the tiniest fraction of 8.6 and 6.4 in here. But so according to this, ace-5, ace-4, and ace-3, at least with this frequency, they shouldn't be calls. They aren't plus EV calls because it doesn't hit the threshold of 5.75. Same with the Jack-9, should probably be folded here. So these are the pre-flop EVs. How does this post-flop thing work again? Flop runouts, yes. So I click on flop runouts, It sucks because it needs to aggregate it again. Just like in PioSolver, you can do the, I don't know what it's called, multi-flop aggregation report or something like that. Here in Simple Postflop, you have a similar tool. So I have solved 74 flops with this specific game tree. If you want to quickly switch from the results from one flop to another, this is how you do it. So you merge them, you aggregate it, and then you wait a bit. Here we have an overview of all of the 74 flops. If you want to have specific flops, like let's say king high, you click the king, let's say some king 10 flops. So here we see the different ones. You see, you can have a look at the c-bet frequency on king high flops. And you can also click here to see the results on this specific flop. So this might be an interesting way of browsing through all of those results that you have just loaded up. For the ace-high flops, maybe you're interested in c-betting frequencies on various ace-high flops. So you can sort by c-betting frequency. So we see more checks on the ace 8-7 than on ace 4, for example, which is pretty obvious, but maybe some differences are more nuanced or subtle. So yeah, this is how you use what we would call multi-flop aggregation in PioSolver. This is how you do that in Simple Postflop. Now I think the final feature I could show you guys. I'll just open this one again. I will go back to my regular output folder. Take this example again. Let's say we have a small c-bet, we get a call, we have that deuce turn, and I want to overbet perhaps. And this is how villain should respond. So the final thing we can do is note lock some of villain's response. So note locking means I will manually force him to make a certain call or a certain fold. So what you want to do then is, for example, I want to make him fold some more borderline hands to see how that shifts my overbetting frequency. So click on fold and I will edit strategy. You have edit and lock strategy. So edit strategy, this is I'm gonna edit his folds. So if I add hands to this range, they will be folded. So I will fold more a7, jack 8, jack 9, jack 10, 10 9, 9 7. Let's say I want to fold some jacks that don't have a flush draw. So to do that, I will deselect the diamond combos and just fold all of those. So now we see that we already went from 59 to 67 folding frequency. I'm gonna apply that. And then I'm gonna recalculate this turn. So what we see here is that versus an overfolding villain, we basically overbet everything that can't win at showdown. And what you can do is you have a look at the Nash EVs before you note lock this and have the optimal response, and after you do this. So you can see how much EV a certain change in strategy or a certain bet size or a certain line adds to the equilibrium strategy. So this is note locking in Simple Postflop. It sometimes gets a bit annoying or counterintuitive when you want to add some raises, but well, the raises come from either the calls or the folds, and sometimes that has some weird effects. I'm not sure if I'm doing something wrong or if it's by design that it's not super easy. Like let's say a hand is mixed between folding, calling, and raising. Folding, calling, and raising. Let's say I want to increase its raising frequency. Like, does it come from the calling frequency or from the folding frequency? So increasing the raising frequency takes combos out of the calling frequency or out of the folding frequency. But that's not always obvious to me, at least how a Simple Postflop handles that. But, well, mostly my note locks are just adding a bit more folds or removing some hands from the raises. So sometimes I will remove a hand from the raises and then still manually add it to folds or calls to fine-tune that. And just like that, I think we've gone over the most obvious Simple Postflop things that are interesting. Let's have another quick look here. You have the rounding button, which I never use, but it rounds up the strategy, so it's easier to remember, but it doesn't solve it for the rounded strategy. It basically has the perfect solve and then rounds up or down. So you will be removed from equilibrium that way. Obviously, you can't replicate a perfect strategy, so rounding the strategy might make it easier for you to look at what is really going on. I'm going to clear this again. So here you have a couple of options. I solve for cash without rake, but you could solve with postflop rake and then input it here. So this is about what the rake would be on 500 zoom. I don't really care too much about solving it with postflop rake. I think rake has an impact on preflop, but I don't think it had too much impact on postflop results. Yeah, I think that's gonna be it for Simple Postflop. So I really like the tool. I will link to a comparison video somebody else made. Yeah, they both have their benefits. They both have their drawbacks. I think big benefits of Simple Postflop are the fact that I can manually edit my game tree. I like this quick overview of how various parts of the range are played. Node locking, I think both in Simple Postflop and Pile Solver, either I haven't done it enough or either it's just stays annoying to do, not super easy to node lock and resolve. I do like in Simple Postflop you can, yeah, add a turn bet size, add a river bet size, and recalculate. What I think Pile Solver does a bit better is the range explorer. So here, for example, we want to see what the bets are composed of. I could edit strategy, not really to edit, but to have an overview of how the range looks like. But what annoys me is that all of this, I think it only adds up to 66%. So it would make more sense for me to have it round up to 100%. That makes it easier to understand that our betting range consists out of a certain amount of top pairs and a certain amount of sets, but I want those amounts to add up to 100% instead of to 66 or to 15 if you want to have a look at the checkback range. Yes, I know I can rescale this myself to 100%, but I want some ease of use here instead of having to put in extra work. So that's a thing that Pile Solver does better. So yeah, now I have both. I still use Simple Postflop most of the time for my basic solves. Maybe do some more in-depth study in Pile Solver. Obviously, everybody will be a bit biased based on what they originally used or what they have the most experience with. But there's people out there looking for more Simple Postflop info, so I hope they got that out of this video. If you have some tips or I did something wrong or I could do something better, please let me know in the comments. And yeah, I'll see you guys back in another video.